My name is Sophia, and I always believed my marriage to Daniel was uncheckable. We had been together for over a decade, and while things had become routine, I never doubted his loyalty. That is, until one evening when a small slip in his behavior opened a door I never expected to walk through. Daniel had been working late more often than usual, claiming it was due to a big project at work. I didn't think much of it at first, but when his late nights began to coincide with unexplained phone calls, I grew suspicious. One evening, I noticed his phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. A message preview flashed across the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight," it read, followed by a heart emoji. My breath caught in my throat. I knew I shouldn't snoop, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was from someone named Emily. My hands trembled as I put the phone down. Questions swirled in my mind. Who was she? And what did she mean by tonight? Instead of confronting Daniel, I decided to follow him. I needed to know the truth. That night, he left the house around 8 p.m., claiming he had a meeting with a client. I waited a few minutes before following him. He drove across town to a boutique hotel, the kind with dim lighting and discreet entrances. I parked a safe distance away and watched as a woman approached him in the parking lot. She was stunning long blonde hair, a fitted dress that left little to the imagination. My stomach churned. They embraced briefly before walking inside together. I sat there, frozen, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to confront them, to scream, to demand answers, but another part of me felt curious. I don't know what possessed me, but I got out of the car and followed them into the hotel. I trailed behind them at a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest. They took the elevator to the 3rd floor. I waited a moment before following, noting the room number they entered. Room 312. The hallway was silent as I approached. The door hadn't fully closed, leaving a small gap. Through the crack, I saw them. Daniel was kissing her, his hands gripping her waist with a passion I hadn't seen in years. My breath hitched, but I couldn't look away. Instead of anger, I felt a strange sense of fascination. I crouched near the door, my pulse racing as I watched their intimacy unfold. Their movements were fluid, filled with desire, and I found myself captivated by the scene. It was as if I was witnessing a side of Daniel I had never known, a side that both shocked and intrigued me. Instead of feeling betrayed, I felt a forbidden thrill coursing through me. This wasn't what I expected. I stayed there, watching in silence, my emotions a whirlwind of confusion and curiosity. When it was over, I slipped away quietly, my thoughts tangled as I drove home. That night, as Daniel climbed into bed beside me, I couldn't help but see him in a new light. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was exhilarated, and I couldn't wait to see what would happen next. The next day, I couldn't shake the images from my mind. My emotions were a mix of guilt and excitement. Daniel acted completely normal, as if nothing had happened. He kissed me goodbye before heading to work. I found myself wanting to follow him again, to understand the side of him that he had hidden from me. When evening came, he left the house once more, using the same excuse. My pulse quickened as I grabbed my keys. This time, they met at a quiet, upscale restaurant. I sat at a corner table, watching them from afar. They were laughing, their body language comfortable and intimate. Daniel looked genuinely happy. Instead of feeling hurt, I found myself smiling. Seeing him like this stirred something unexpected in me. When they left, I followed them back to the hotel. This time, I was more deliberate in my actions. I found a spot where I could see into the room through a small gap in the curtains. My breath hitched as I watched them. Their connection was undeniable, their passion unrestrained. I felt like an intruder, but I couldn't pull myself away. The forbidden nature of it all was intoxicating. As they moved together, I felt a strange thrill run through me, a mix of curiosity and arousal. It was as if I was discovering something new about myself, something I hadn't realized before. I stayed longer this time, observing every detail. Their laughter, their whispers, their shared intimacy. When I finally left, my heart was pounding, and my thoughts were a tangled mess. That night, I lay in bed beside Daniel, replaying everything I had seen. I didn't feel betrayed anymore. Instead, I felt an odd sense of connection to him, as if this secret had brought us closer in some strange way. Over the next few weeks, I continued to watch. Each time, I felt more confident in my choices. Daniel remained unaware, but I began to see him in a new light, a man with desires, passions, and secrets. And I couldn't deny it anymore. Those secrets fascinated me, even drew me in further. One evening, I decided to take things a step further. Instead of just watching, I wanted to understand. I followed Daniel to the hotel again, but this time I waited until they were inside before me. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself think. Daniel opened the door, his expression shifting from shock to panic. Behind him, Emily stood frozen. "Olivia?" he stammered, his voice unsteady. What are you doing here?" I smiled, stepping inside. "Relax, Daniel. I'm not here to fight," I said, my voice calm but firm. Emily looked between us, her face pale. "I should go," she murmured, reaching for her bag. "No," I said quickly, holding up a hand. "Stay. I think we all need to talk." Daniel's confusion deepened, but he didn't protest. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, avoiding my gaze. I took a deep breath, my nerves threatening to overtake me. "I know about the two of you," I began. Daniel started to speak, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Let me finish," I said firmly. "I've been following you for weeks," I continued. "I've seen everything, and I'm not angry." Emily's eyes widened, and Daniel looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. "What are you saying?" he asked. "I'm saying that I've been watching, and I've discovered something about myself," I admitted. I thought I'd feel betrayed, but instead I felt intrigued, alive, like I was seeing a new side of you. Daniel stared at me, speechless. Emily fidgeted nervously, clearly unsure of what to say. "I don't want to stop this," I said finally, my voice steady. "I want to understand it. Be a part of it." The room fell into silence, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. Daniel looked at Emily, then back at me. "Olivia, are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. I nodded, my heart racing. "Yes, I've never been more sure of anything." Emily finally spoke, her voice hesitant. "This is unexpected," she said, glancing at Daniel. "It's unexpected for me too," I admitted, "but I want to see where this goes for all of us." Daniel reached for my hand, his grip warm and steady. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said. The tension in the room eased slightly, and I felt a flicker of something new possibility. This wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was the life I was choosing. And for the first time, it felt right. In the following days, things felt surreal. Daniel was more attentive, and Emily seemed cautious but curious. We arranged to meet again, this time at a neutral location where we could talk openly without fear of being interrupted. Sitting together at a small, quiet cafe, I explained how I felt, the curiosity, the thrill, the lack of jealousy. Emily listened carefully, occasionally glancing at Daniel for reassurance. "I don't want to hurt you," she said softly. "You're not," I replied firmly. "This isn't about pain. It's about discovery for all of us." Daniel reached for my hand across the table. "Olivia, this is unexpected, but I want to make sure this is what you want." I nodded, meeting his gaze. "It is. I feel like we're exploring something new together, not apart." As the conversation continued, I felt the tension in the room dissolve, replaced by a sense of connection. The following week, Daniel suggested we all spend an evening together. Emily hesitated, but eventually agreed. That evening was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just about intimacy. It was about understanding. We laughed, shared stories, and for the first time, I saw Emily as more than just the other woman. She was kind, intelligent, and genuinely cared for Daniel. I realized she wasn't a threat, but an addition to our dynamic. As the night progressed, the boundaries between us blurred. What began as an experiment became something more profound. When the night ended, I felt a strange mix of emotions, excitement, fear, and an overwhelming sense of liberation. The next morning, I woke up beside Daniel, his arm draped over me. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Our marriage was no longer traditional, but it was ours. And for the first time, I felt like we were partners in every sense. Emily remained a part of our lives, but not in the way I had initially feared. She became a bridge to something deeper. It wasn't a perfect arrangement, but it worked for us. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Life is rarely what we expect, but sometimes it's the unexpected that teaches us who we truly are. And as I stood in the kitchen that morning, watching Daniel prepare breakfast, I knew I wouldn't change a thing. The days that followed brought a new kind of balance into our lives. It was unconventional, but it worked. Daniel and I communicated more openly than we ever had before, breaking down walls we didn't know existed. Emily, too, became a confidant in ways I never expected. It was strange, but liberating to share this part of our lives. One evening, as we all sat together in the living room, Emily brought up something none of us had addressed directly. "What happens next?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. "Is this sustainable?" Daniel looked at me, silently asking for my input. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I think the answer depends on all of us," I said. "If we're honest and respectful, I don't see why it couldn't work." Emily nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I've never been part of something like this before," she admitted. "Neither have we," Daniel said, chuckling softly. "But it feels right, doesn't it?" I agreed, feeling a sense of solidarity between the three of us. It wasn't traditional, but it was honest. Over time, we developed a rhythm, one built on communication and mutual understanding. We faced challenges, of course, moments of jealousy, uncertainty, and doubt, but we faced them together. And through it all, I discovered something about myself. I was capable of more love and acceptance than I ever imagined. This journey wasn't just about Daniel or Emily. It was about me, about embracing the complexities of life. As I lay in bed that night, sandwiched between the two people who meant the most to me, I felt a profound sense of peace. Our story was unconventional, even controversial, but it was ours, and that was all that mattered. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of their presence, and smiled. Life, for all its twists and turns, had finally made sense. The following morning, as sunlight poured into the room, I woke up feeling an unfamiliar sense of calm. Daniel was already awake, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, while Emily lay peacefully beside me. For a moment, I simply observed them, marveling at how far we'd come from where we started. Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open to meet mine. She smiled softly, a warmth in her expression that made me feel at ease. "Morning," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. Daniel turned, his own smile lighting up his face. "Good morning," he said, his tone gentle. "I made coffee. Do you want some?" I nodded, sitting up and stretching. The atmosphere in the room was light, filled with an unspoken understanding. As we shared breakfast together, I realized that this arrangement had brought a new depth to our relationship. It wasn't just about desire or passion anymore. It was about connection, trust, and mutual respect. Later that day, the three of us decided to take a walk in the park. The fresh air and open space felt invigorating. We laughed, talked, and even played a little. It felt like a scene from a life I never thought I'd live, but one I was grateful for. As the sun set, casting golden hues over the horizon, Daniel took my hand and Emily's, linking us together. "This is our life now," he said, his voice steady, "and I wouldn't trade it for anything." I looked at him, then at Emily, and felt tears welling up in my eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude. This unconventional journey had brought us closer than I ever imagined, and I knew it was just the beginning. As we walked back home, the three of us hand in hand, I felt a sense of fulfillment I never knew I was missing. Life had taken us on a path I could never have predicted, but it was one I wouldn't change for anything. And in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The weeks that followed were a blend of discovery and adjustment. Every day felt like uncharted territory. Daniel and I had deeper conversations about our boundaries and desires, things we had never dared to discuss before. Emily, too, became more open with her feelings. She admitted she had initially feared judgment and rejection, but now she felt accepted and valued. something she hadn't experienced in her previous relationships. One evening, we decided to host a dinner at home, just the three of us. It felt like a celebration of this new life we were building. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter and shared stories. It felt like a family, unconventional but real. After dinner, we sat by the fireplace, a bottle of wine between us. The flickering flames cast a soft glow in the room. Emily leaned back, her laughter ringing out as Daniel recounted an embarrassing story from his college days. I watched them both, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This was home. This was us. As the night wore on, the wine loosened our inhibitions. Conversations turned more intimate, more vulnerable. Emily spoke about her dreams and fears. Daniel shared his struggles, and I opened up about my hidden insecurities. The honesty in the room was overwhelming. It was as if we were bearing our souls, weaving them together. By the time the fire burned low, we were sitting closer, the silence between us comfortable and meaningful. Daniel reached for my hand, then Emily's, linking us in a quiet gesture of unity. "This is what love looks like," he said softly. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. Love wasn't just about two people anymore. It was about connection, understanding, and choice. That night, as we all sat together, I realized that this journey wasn't about finding happiness. It was about creating it. Life may not have unfolded the way I imagined, but it had led me here. And for that, I was endlessly grateful. As we extinguished the last embers of the fire and made our way to bed, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was my life, my choice, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And as I drifted off to sleep, surrounded by warmth and love, I knew we had found something truly extraordinary. The following morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow across the room. Daniel was the first to wake, and I watched as he moved quietly, his face soft with contentment. Emily stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open to meet mine. A sleepy smile spread across her face. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice carrying a warmth that matched the sunlight streaming in. "Morning," I replied, my voice gentle. Daniel returned with a tray of coffee and pastries, a rare treat. As we shared breakfast in bed, laughter filled the room, mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. It felt surreal, like a dream I didn't want to wake from. The love and connection between us were undeniable. Later that day, we decided to take a spontaneous road trip, a chance to escape and create new memories together. The drive was filled with music, laughter, and conversations about the future. It felt like a fresh start. We stopped at a quaint bed and breakfast nestled in the hills, the perfect blend of charm and privacy. That evening, we explored the nearby trails, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Standing at the edge of a cliff, the world stretching out before us, Daniel pulled me close. "This is where we belong," he said softly, his voice filled with conviction. Emily joined us, her hand resting on my shoulder. For the first time, I felt like we were a team, a true partnership that defied convention. We returned to the bed and breakfast, the cozy atmosphere wrapping around us like a warm embrace. As the fire crackled in the hearth, we sat together, a quiet moment speaking louder than words ever. Emily rested her head on my shoulder, her breath even and steady. Daniel reached for my hand, his touch grounding me. The journey we had embarked on was unconventional, but it was ours, and that made it perfect. As I closed my eyes that night, the sound of the fire crackling softly in the background, I felt at peace. We had found a new kind of love, one that embraced every part of who we were, and I wouldn't have it any other way.